you're gonna look great. But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better. GymWits, GymWits.
That's right, man. You tell 'em.
Welcome to the GymWits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic.
And I'm Tony Marinucci, a.k.a. Tips with Tony, your registered dietitian.
And we are the GymWits. So we're back with Tony. It's been a crazy couple of months.
Yes.
For all of us. And one of the biggest things over the last couple of months has been a Netflix documentary, What the Health is the name of it, right?
Yeah.
So we had some questions on it, but we were going to... Initially, we'll talk about vegan diets because I think that's more important, and then we'll do a little discussion. I think we've all had a chance to see. I know you guys saw the whole thing. I saw a little bit of it, but I was able to kind of formulate my own opinions. But we're going to talk about vegan diets because that's something that's always being asked and something that people are definitely interested in finding out about.
And so that everyone knows, we're going to review the documentary, just not right now. I think that there's a lot of claims, and there's a lot of questionable science or not questionable, depending on your point of view. And we'll certainly get into that, but that is, maybe we'll touch on it a little bit today, but that's not what we want to talk about because, we don't want to come across as, bashing this or being pro this right now. So what we want to do is, we want to talk about, the vegan lifestyle choice, from sort of an unbiased perspective, and the sort of I don't want to say health consequences because that's negative, but just the.
I just want to talk about the vegan diet in general because it can be a healthful diet, just like any diet can be healthy, but it's a matter of how you approach it. And there's just since the documentary came out, a lot of people are going vegan, and I want to make sure that they know, all sides and how to and all that stuff.
All right, so I guess that brings up the first question, which is, what is a vegan diet?
Yes. So this is an important question because I have people often tell me, my clients will tell me that I'm a vegan or I'm a vegetarian, and then I ask them further and they are still eating, fish, or they might eat eggs and avoid dairy. So for the purpose of this podcast, this episode, the vegan diet is what it truly is, which is no animal products whatsoever. So no dairy, no eggs, no meat, no poultry, no fish. That is the definition of a vegan diet.
What about honey?
And so honey, and then once again, that kind of goes up to the person's discretion. Mm-hmm. As a registered dietitian, that's something that we will identify with the individual. But generally, we classify the vegan diet as no dairy, no animal products. And yeah, pretty much no dairy, no animal products. Because then you go into further, you can find that there's like lacto-ovo-vegetarian, there's ovo-vegetarians, lacto-ovo meaning they have milk and eggs, but they exclude meat and poultry. Then you have the pescatarian who has fish and avoids, but still has meat, still has dairy, but not meat. So there's a whole bunch of different definitions. But as for today, the vegan diet is going to be the person that who excludes meat and dairy and animal products in general.
Okay, from a diet perspective, not necessarily a moral perspective, what are the main reasons that your clients or people in general, why would they adopt a vegan diet?
Yeah, so, and I'm happy that you said that because there are plenty of other reasons why people do choose to be vegan, but as a registered dietitian, I'm going to talk about what I'm knowledgeable about mostly is the nutrition reasons. And people will follow the vegan diet for multiple reasons. Sometimes it's cultural. That's just how their religion is, and that's how they were raised, and that's how they're brought up. So obviously I need to respect that. Then there's people will think it's a way to lose weight. So people will go do the vegan diet that way. Believe it or not, a lot of people actually hide behind eating disorders by going vegan or vegetarian. So you need to definitely explore something like that. And then, there are a lot of positives to the vegan diet. So cardiologists will probably almost prescribe that as their diet to help reverse cardiovascular disease in certain stages. Certain things like high cholesterol can actually be treated with the vegan diet.
So with the vegan diet, obviously you're not getting animal products, and there are nutrients and things in animal products that you may or may not be able to get in non-animal products. So are there essential things that you're not getting from using a vegan diet, And if so, how does one go about kind of compensating for it?
Right. So there's 3 mineral deficiencies, vitamin and mineral deficiencies that come to mind with the vegan diet. It's just vitamin B12, because it's mostly only found in animal products, although there are some exceptions to that rule. But then once again, you have to be really knowledgeable about how much and that you actually have those alternatives, which we'll get into. So vitamin B12, vitamin D, just because vitamin D sources tend to be higher in things like fish, the sunlight, which we're going to is separate, but yeah. So, and mostly animal products will have the vitamin D, and then iron is another one. So iron, you can get other sources of iron from like beans and, you know, your green leafy greens, but there's the difference between heme iron and non-heme iron. Heme iron is from animal products, and it tends to be more easily absorbed in the everyday human, whereas the non-heme iron isn't as easily absorbed. However, high amounts of vitamin C, which is like fruits and vegetables, which vegans tend to, well, if they're doing it the right way, tend to have more of, then they might not necessarily have an issue with that. So those are the things that come to mind. But it depends on how the person is actually approaching the vegan diet, because vegan I'm talking about like whole foods and doing it the healthy way and the right way. Those are what the benefits would be, and they probably wouldn't be at risk for those deficiencies, but it depends on the approach.
So now I know this not 100% your area of expertise. What about someone who may wish to, adopt a vegan diet and say, well, I can take shots or supplements for iron or B12. Do you have any experience with that? Of people trying to do that, and is it as good as food, as effective, not as much so? What do you think of that?
Yeah. So, first of all, if anyone is considering, they're on the vegan diet and they're going to go take like vitamin, like B12 shots, they need to first be diagnosed with a deficiency. Don't just go taking a supplement and getting vitamin B12 shots just because you heard that it improves your energy levels. Like, first get tested. If your blood work comes back that you are, say, anemic, meaning you're lacking iron, or vitamin D deficient, or vitamin B12 low in vitamin B12, and you're not willing to do it through dietary sources, then supplementation may be appropriate. But I, as a dietitian, and because for studies will show you that the food, the nutrients itself are better absorbed. The nutrients are going to be better absorbed through food than through supplementation. But it definitely, if they're deficient, it's not going to hurt them, because they do need to bring that up for the body to be working optimally.
And then, so among like the kind of macros, obviously protein becomes a little bit more challenging if you're on a vegan diet. So I guess 2 questions based around protein. One is, how does one go about getting the sufficient amount of protein in their diet with the vegan diet? And then a second question is, I know I've heard back when I'd taken some kind of a nutrition course or something a while back, and when they were talking about vegan diets, that kind of combining proteins was important for that type of a diet. So I guess 1 is, how do you get the protein, and 2, is it important to combine types of protein within your meals when you are eating, if you're eating a vegan diet?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'm actually going to start with your second one, because that is actually an old belief thinking that we had, that people had to, in order to get their amino acids, had to have carbohydrates and protein. Like, so for example, rice and beans. Beans would be a plant-based protein, and rice is a carbohydrate. And it was believed that they had to have them you had to have them at the same time in order to get all the essential amino acids for your body to benefit from the adequate protein. But that's not necessarily true, as long as you're getting a variety throughout your day. So if you're getting a bunch of carbohydrates and proteins throughout the day, then that's fine. But if, it doesn't necessarily have to be, you don't have to have rice and beans together. But as for getting enough protein, so it's kind of, we're not necessarily going to be protein deficient on a vegan diet, but your protein intakes are going to be less. And so, for example, if you're trying to lose weight, it might be a challenge. There's a lot of different factors, but we could probably talk about that at another time. But just in general, nuts and seeds, whole grains, a good protein source is going to be something like tofu or beans, or changing your grains to something like quinoa, for example, is a whole grain that naturally has more protein than most other carbohydrates. So a lot of your whole grains are going to have more protein. Your nuts and your seeds have more protein. Your tofu, tempeh, those sort of options.
And then I guess to keep with the protein for one more question. So obviously athletes and bodybuilders tend to have a little bit higher protein requirement than the average person. How is it possible, or is it effective to be a vegan athlete? And how much harder does an athlete have to work in order to maintain, their own kind of protein requirements? Since it is just so, I don't see it as somebody who's again anti-vegan diet, but more as somebody who realizes how much easier it is to get protein from meat and dairy.
Yeah.
So how does an athlete go about it in a way that can kind of work for them, where they meet those requirements?
They'll usually, most athletes, especially if it's something like bodybuilding, they usually will just choose a vegan supplement or protein powder. So that's an easy way to do it. Or they just, if you, especially bodybuilding, to believe it or not, it's actually, protein, yes, is for muscle repair, but to actually improve size is just calories.
Yeah.
It's calories, and calories. So if you're consuming more calories, you start consuming more protein, and it all kind of works together.
Yeah.
So that's how I would answer, that's how to answer that.
So from my experience, and I have no data to back any of this up, I don't know many vegans that are quote unquote overweight. Most of my friends, most of the people that I've met that are vegan are pretty slim. Say that they never have issues with being hungry. And there's a sort of general consensus for whatever reason, that if you're vegan, you're going to lose weight, you're going to lose fat, or it's harder to become fat. Even though I've had some vegan friends tell me about the quote unquote junk food vegans, which I don't really know what that is. I guess you could go figure. But is that true about weight loss? Is there any validity to that? And what are some of the pros of a vegan diet? Is potentially losing weight or not gaining weight? Is that a pro?
Yeah. So with the vegan diet, studies do show that most people that follow a more plant-based diet, not specifically vegan or vegetarian, tend to have a normal body weight more likely than someone who's not. So it's much easier to obtain that. And chances are it's probably because of the dietary fiber, which is one of the benefits to the plants that most, vegans, if, like I said, if they're doing, they're not what you're saying, a junk food vegan. I think of like a junk food vegan being someone who has like a lot of, say, just like chips and pasta and candy, and it's just not a good diet in general, and they're just not having fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds and beans and all that stuff that makes it good. So generally speaking, they are going to have be at a healthier weight, and because the dietary fiber makes you feel full, so then you don't overeat. And there's also a lot of things that you almost have to say no to, right? There's less options out there, so you're naturally less tempted to have something, let's say like a ice cream sandwich, like those things that are, or a milkshake, or those like things that we typically indulge in. You're kind of limited of those options. So it can help with weight management. So I do encourage people to kind of go towards that more plant-based eating to help managing their weight. But on the flip side, some people find that sometimes, we talked about on the protein episode, like protein tends to give our bodies, like plant-based proteins, animal-based proteins tend to curb that appetite more so than others. So it really is dependent on the person, because sometimes people find that if they don't have, say, like chicken or fish or eggs or yogurt or cottage cheese or those, they're still hungry all the time. So even though they're eating more fiber, for whatever reason, it's just not working in their favor.
So now this is not necessarily a question about science, but more just observation. From your experience, do people that have a vegan diet tend to want to have a healthier lifestyle? Perhaps they are more spiritual with what they put in their body, or they like to exercise more. Have you experienced anything along those lines?
So I see both sides. So I see that very often. So people who have been vegan like their whole lives, that all will see, because it is a lifestyle change. It is just like any other diet. It's a commitment, and it's something that they're doing for multiple reasons. And so in that sense, I do see that. But then on the flip side, I see it almost like as a fad. and people are just going vegan because they think it's a new diet. It's like a new trend in that way. And it's a little bit disheartening because they'll do it for a little bit, give it up, and then they go back to like, oh, well, I just can't eat any fruits and vegetables now. Like, you know, it's like that doesn't, no, the idea, the lesson from it is, you know, maybe make some of your meals a little bit more plant-based and kind of go towards that route a little bit more frequently than not.
So I'm going to extrapolate from what you're saying that if someone is to go vegan, you think that the best way is to do it as a full lifestyle change and really commit to it?
I mean, like any diet, right?
Sure.
Like any diet, whatever you choose to eat, the sooner you figure out what you enjoy to eat and what's your diet, the better off you'll be. You're going to stop jumping from here to there. And once we have consistency, that makes my job a whole lot easier because then I have something to work with rather than kind of like the all over the place. So I think everyone, you know, the term diet, I think we've spoken about this before. It has such a negative connotation. Yeah. Diet is simply just the word that is what exists of what we're eating.
What we eat.
Yeah. So that's how I see it.
So you mentioned earlier that doctors sometimes diagnose a vegan diet for their patients.
Yeah, they might recommend going vegan. It's strongly recommended in cardiac patients.
Oh God, okay.
Because it's directly what fiber does is it takes basically goes through the blood, takes the cholesterol out, and then it helps you excrete.
But now are they recommending the vegan diet because of the more fiber, or because they're decreasing, like, let's say red meat or dairy, or some combination?
So
of that
it's probably it's a combination of multiple things. So more plant-based foods have more antioxidants, which help with decreasing inflammation. So when you decrease inflammation, you decrease things that you're like risk for a heart attack. You decrease a lot of other benefits as well. Actually, like you decrease your risk for some cancers. You know, those are the benefits to including all of those what are called the antioxidants. So the vitamin-rich foods, colorful foods.
So now, I guess one question is, so there have been a number of cases in which parents have been charged with child endangerment and similar things because of putting infants and children on a vegan diet. So I guess my question is, what does the research or the science say about putting a child on a vegan diet? Like, are those charges kind of unfair, or, you know, is it okay? Is it healthy to put a child on a vegan diet? And if not, what is an appropriate age to allow a child to start a vegan diet?
That's a really, really good question. So I don't think anyone should be charged for choosing how they're feeding their children, because, to be honest, and not to offend anyone in this statement, but I don't think a lot of people know how to feed their children. Fair. In the sense of an alternate way of just not feeding them fruits and vegetables, whether they're eating meat or not, do you know what I mean? Or fried foods or junk foods. So I think that no, like no one should be you know, that would be a whole other topic. But, as for the vegan diet, so it's just something that I have to be, you know, I do have experience working for a preschool where some of the kids would come in and they would be diagnosed with, say, anemia, and I'd find out that they were on the vegan diet. So honestly, it's just something to be more vigilant about and to really look and to make sure that they're using, like I said, they're getting their alternate protein sources, especially as a kid who's still growing. So it's not that they just can't eat, you know, have to avoid meat and dairy, but then that they are definitely make sure they're getting their, you know, their nut butters or avocado as a spread or hummus as a spread, or, you know, whatever you have to do to kind of help them get that. That's really important. And then just for like infancy, I just want to say, like, obviously we try to encourage breastfeeding. But if that's not an option, then cow's milk is more appropriate at that time. And there are alternatives because there are children with those allergens, and, you know, there are other ways, but it's just one of those things that you have to be closely monitored.
So now, I guess I don't know if we should cover it now, or I guess we'll talk a little bit now, but maybe if you want to save this for when we discuss the documentary, we can do it more. But obviously for some people, there are various reasons why people start vegan diets, but for some it's because meat is bad. So I guess the question is meat bad for you? Okay. So whether it's a philosophical, moral, like, is it bad to eat any meat at all?
Okay.
Or dairy, I guess, in this case.
So you guys, I feel like if you guys are just listening to this podcast for the first time, I repeat myself, but it's important because we have new listeners all of the time. So there is not one good food or one bad food. There are foods we should eat more of, and there are foods we should eat less of.
Can ice cream be one of those foods we eat more of?
Yeah. No. You can enjoy it, but in small amounts. So anyways, the difference, I think, what the documentary didn't do is they didn't differentiate between like processed meats and whole meats. They didn't talk about like the cooking process and all of that stuff. So a general recommendation would be to leave the protein to about a quarter of your plate, so you have what you need, which are the nutrients from the vegetables, but you still need animal protein. I mean, you can get protein from any way, but it is just tends to be it's okay. Like there's nothing that's bad about it. There's just when we have too much of it, we're probably not getting enough of something else.
All right, so let's say I'm sure we have many listeners, many people are thinking about transitioning over into a vegan diet, whether they're vegetarian or meat eaters. So how would you recommend one transition into a vegan diet? Like what steps do they have to take? Also in addition to that, does it make sense to do it like kind of stop meat and dairy cold turkey, or do you gradually build or the reverse, I guess, of building into a vegan diet? Like, do you eliminate things slowly, or do you just kind of just go right into vegan diet?
I believe everything should be slow because you need to observe how your body changes, how it reacts. One thing that we didn't touch upon is the vegan diet, because of the dietary fiber, tends to create a lot of bloating, and people find discomfort with that. So if you just all of a sudden like cut out all animal protein and then you go to all this dietary fiber and you don't increase your water and you don't do it gradually, you're going to have issues in the bathroom, like serious issues. So I want to inform my listeners to slowly start to incorporate it by looking at how much meat do you currently eat, and then think ahead of what can I do, what can be the alternative to that. So maybe try a new bean recipe, maybe just do some meatless meals. If you're a really, really big meat eater, my recommendation, and you do a lot of like dairy as well, would just go from maybe if you are thinking about transitioning to complete vegan, go from a more, go to like maybe lacto-ovo, which we talked about in the beginning. So like you have milk and eggs, but you don't have meat. And then maybe start to see what you can incorporate instead, and then slowly start to maybe decrease the dairy and then find alternates for that. So those are the things you want to do, but make sure that when you do it, you're not introducing processed foods, because there's plenty of processed vegan options, especially like dairy alternatives sometimes can be very high in sugar, or just the processed foods high in sodium, or a laundry list of things. So make sure that when you do start to remove some of those animal proteins, that you include more plant-based whole foods when doing so.
I'll sort of follow up on what you just said. I've heard pretty negative things about tofu. And I actually like tofu, and I've eaten a lot about it. I've heard that it has hormonal effects on women. Is there any truth to this? Is there really data that proves this?
No, there's actually plenty of wonderful data actually that supports the soybean and tofu, which is like one of the least of the processed forms of actually being beneficial for the heart. So we're talking about like cardiovascular disease. It has what's called isoflavones, which basically support a healthy heart, and so they are beneficial. But like anything, one thing that people might be concerned about is when they do vegan is maybe they are doing a lot of soy products, and the hormones is nothing to worry about unless there's really nothing to support this. But if someone has like breast cancer in their family, which is fed through estrogen, then they might want to limit the amount that they have. But to be honest, plant-based eating will actually help with prevention of a lot of cancer. So I'm not going to even say that. But regardless, at the end of the day, like any diet, there should be variety. So your plant to replace your protein, it shouldn't just be tofu. It should be all the other things we talked about.
All right, so I realistically, I'll probably never be switching over to vegan, but I definitely agree with and have been trying to eat a more plant-based diet and cut out the meat a little bit. But it's nothing.
You lie.
There's nothing that I'll ever completely switch to. But I've had experiences eating vegan meals and generally, I found a couple things. One is it's hard to get the right kind of flavor for somebody who's so used, like the right texture and flavor for someone who's so used to meat. I almost feel like it's necessary in my diet. And I've been to places that have been okay. I've been to places that have been pretty good. I did have a great experience when I was in Thailand. We were at a elephant sanctuary for a few days, and they're all vegan. And the meals were prepared beautifully, and they were really, really tasty. But my takeaway from my own experience with vegan meals and with this is that in order to have a really flavorful, tasty meal, it seems like it's more work and more complicated than it would be just, throwing some, a steak on the pan and putting some salt and pepper on it, and you get some of those flavors and the texture that you really like. Am I wrong? Like, is it easy to make simple but good tasting vegan meals, or am I just completely biased as a meat eater? Like, what's
no? It definitely is, but the thing is it's probably a learning curve, and once if your taste buds are used to something else, it needs to adjust to something else. But the benefits to things like, for example, like tofu and tempeh, and even things like beans, honestly, they're not that much. They don't have that much flavor naturally. However, with herbs and spices and like healthy maybe like curry sauces, there's a way to improve that flavor while improving the nutrition, because herbs and spices are also really beneficial for your health as well.
Cool. All right, so like to talk about this documentary a little bit, right? We'll get into it more once again. There was one claim in it that and there was a lot of them, but this one really sort of made my head spin, where one doctor basically said that sugar does not cause diabetes, that you would have to eat a ton of it for it to really be bad, that it either gets stored as glycogen in the muscles or it gets burned off. So could you please comment on that?
Yeah, so that was a little bit disheartening for me to watch, because I know I actually have patients or clients with diabetes and watched the documentary and came to me and told me that they were going vegan, which is fine, but they were then going back to drinking soda and having juice because they were under the impression that it wasn't going to affect their blood sugars. So if you have issues with managing your blood sugars and you have diabetes, sugar is still something that you need to be mindful of, and you do not want to incorporate in excess. To be honest, we don't know the cause of diabetes. We don't know what it is. So the fact that he felt that he could say this is what causes diabetes, like, we don't know. We have assumptions. There's multiple factors, from environmental to diet to our genes, hereditary. There's tons of theories, but the actual definition of diabetes is insulin sensitivity, and we don't know what causes that. So if you have diabetes, definitely speak to a registered dietitian, but do not think that you can go back to eating all this sugar. And then also too, just I don't want to get into it too much. I really, it's this documentary, guys, there's much better documentaries out there. What's the Health did not do a very good job. They played with the science a lot. It was really upsetting as a nutrition professional to watch them take advantage, almost, to be honest, of the public who doesn't have a science background or knowledge. So it's really hard for me to even comment on it without getting a little bit upset. Well, yeah, that was the reason why I wanted to talk about vegan diets first and save the documentary for the last thing, because I wanted to make it clear, like, we're not anti-vegan diet, and that there are merits to it, and it's something that some people should consider for a variety of reasons. But there's ways of doing good science and producing a good documentary, and there are ways of not doing it. And after 30 minutes of it, and I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but right away it's like, well, they're cherry picking the data, they're making weird claims, they're not really showing the opposing side. And I feel like and I called Justin out earlier. He did the same thing where he was showing me a documentary on something of a somewhat of a controversial topic, and it was the same kind of thing, which is kind of funny that Justin hates this. I thought it wasn't as disingenuous. The guy wasn't as smug, but it was the same thing where they cherry picked information and kind of chose to use the stats that they wanted to use and the science that they wanted to use, but not look at the opposing views. And so I think that's a frustrating thing about it, is that, it's one of those things where
they may be coming to the right conclusion, but they're doing all the wrong things to get to it.
Yeah.
And so it just can be frustrating as somebody who's in the industry, because they're going to lead, if you tell people eat all the sugar you want, that's not a good way to go. And if you're, and then at the same time, if you're saying, things are, like eating an egg is as bad as smoking, it's like, no, it's not quite. They're conflating things.
Yeah.
And, it's like if someone died drinking too much water, that doesn't mean water is as bad as smoking. It just
Right.
means don't drink 5 gallons of water in one sitting. So, that's part of the issue with it. But yeah, we'll save it, a further discussion. We can save that.
Yeah, I just want people to take away from this, just like any other time I'm on the show or, we're recording, is you need to do whatever is best for you. And generally, to be healthy, you don't have to go completely vegan, but it is strongly recommended to have a more plant-based diet and to be mindful of always having a variety of foods in your diet and getting alternate nutrition sources, from your grains to your proteins, through your healthy fats. It's important to just, when you look at the plate, there needs to be color on there. That's the takeaway. More color, more nutrients, and not Fruit Loops.
All right, cool. So now we've got an Ask the Dietitian question from Sarah. And Sarah asks, I have recently lost 40 pounds over an 8-month period. My starting weight was 196 pounds, and now I'm close to my goal. Current weight is 156. I'm experiencing hair loss and was curious if Tony has any tips or advice on what to do, nutrition, supplements, or products that may possibly help regrowth. I did see my dermatologist and was told this can happen with extreme weight loss. And then in parentheses, is 40 pounds extreme? But his only advice to me was time. This is reasonable, but hard to swallow when you're a female and now with very thin hair. Help.
Okay, so her name is Sarah, you said?
Yes.
Okay, Sarah. Hair loss, first of all, congratulations, because 40 pounds in 8 months is pretty, I think that's a right pace. I mean, everyone's different, but about 1 to 2 pounds per week is pretty much what a dietitian would recommend. And over an 8-month period, 40 pounds sounds like a great job. So congratulations on that. However, the way in which you did it, I don't know. So there is possibility that, if it was a restrictive diet, you may not be getting enough nutrients. Like a lot of your B vitamins can help with hair growth. But before I even get into the sources and supplementation, you want to know what the root cause is, because it might not be because of the weight loss. There are other reasons why people do lose hair or their hair starts to thin.
And from someone who knows quite a bit about hair loss, being myself, even though hair loss in men is way different from in women, I'll tell you this, that I did see a dermatologist, and unless this dermatologist is a hair loss specialist, he might really not know that much. So that's the only thing that I could recommend, is to see a hair loss specialist.
Yeah, I didn't even know that they had those, to be honest. What I would also recommend, though, is just getting like a general physical from your doctor and see if there are any type of vitamin or mineral deficiencies. So let's start with that. And then also, too, I don't know if did you start a new medication? Some side effects medications, even some birth controls that does happen. It could be hormone or stress related. It could be hereditary. I mean, there's so many other factors. But if it isn't, the idea is that you want to get your hair back. So first of all, find the root cause. Always find the root cause, because we can make suggestions, but we can't really treat until we know exactly what's happening. But regardless, in the meantime, incorporating a lot of foods that are rich in those vitamins, especially something like biotin. I would include stuff like that. So like salmon, sunflower seeds, almonds. You would just, if you want, maybe we can post what are good sources of biotin like on the list, or just like overall just general healthy foods for hair growth. Yeah. We'll post that on the website.
Yeah, we can put that on the website. We can also add it to the show notes. So
yeah. Okay. So I'll definitely send that over to you. But yeah, so it really depends on what you're currently eating. And then also just as for supplementation, believe it or not, the FDA only approves topical solutions for hair growth. So anything you take by mouth that claims to help you grow hair was not approved by the FDA. So just be mindful.
Except for finasteride, which is not approved for women, I believe.
Yeah, and don't quote me on this, but that is usually prescribed by a doctor. I don't believe that's over the counter.
100% prescribed by a doctor.
Okay. I was like, I've seen this before in hospitals and clinical settings. I don't believe that's over the counter. So once again, you would need a prescription for that. And I don't know about the studies behind it, if it helps with male or I don't know that.
It's only prescribed right now for men. In fact, can have very detrimental effects for women that are pregnant.
Okay. So yeah, good to know. So yeah, I always try to meet your needs through food first. If that doesn't suffice, then inquire to your doctor about supplementation. If you would like to send in a separate email, Sarah, you're welcome to, about what you're currently eating, because then I can take a look and figure out where the holes are, and it might be nutrition related. So cool. I hope that helps.
Great. Well, that, as usual, that was a great answer. And yeah, Sarah, if you have any other questions, feel free to send us an email. You can send it to thegymwits@gmail.com, or what's your email? What's the best way for people to contact you?
tipswithtony@gmail.com.
Cool. So you can send either one, and if you send it to the GymWits, it'll get forwarded, or obviously you can send it directly to Tony. And hopefully that helps. So I think that was a great discussion. I think that's about it. So as usual, all of our stuff is at thegymwits.com. And Tony, where can people find you?
On Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. I'm there. Tips with Tony with an I.
Isn't Tony awesome? She knows so much.
A lot of school.
Definitely getting great feedback. So awesome. All right. Well, that's it. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic.
And I'm Tony Marinucci, aka Tips with Tony, your registered dietitian.
And we are
the GymWits.